Mother finds camera on son's grave. What she saw inside froze her soul. The pain of loss is a dark abyss, an emptiness that consumes every fiber of one's being. It's a wound that refuses to heal, a sad melody played incessantly in the soul. But what if, in the heart of this unbearable darkness, there was a truth so shocking it could redefine grief itself? What would you do if the final farewell to a child turned into the beginning of a nightmare so profound it would freeze your soul, forever altering your perception of reality and human malice? Prepare yourself, for this story will transport you to a place where despair meets the inexplicable, and a mother's courage defies the limits of terror. In a small town nestled among gentle hills, where streets were adorned with colorful houses and neighbors knew each other by name, Clara's tragedy was an open wound, visible to all. Her son, Daniel, just 10 years old, had suddenly departed, snatched from life by a rare and relentless disease that consumed him in a matter of weeks. That contagious smile, the infinite curiosity in his eyes, the joy he brought to every sunrise. It all vanished in an instant. The funeral was a blurred grey of silent tears and whispered condolences, words Clara could barely hear through the veil of her own sorrow. She, a mother who had dedicated every second of her life to nurturing and protecting Daniel, now felt not just broken, but completely disintegrated, like a crystal vase shattered on the floor. Her emptiness was a silent scream, a deafening echo that filled every corner of her mind, and it seemed that no one, no matter how hard they tried, could comprehend the depth of her unspeakable suffering. The days that followed the burial were a methodical torture, a private purgatory. The house, once vibrant with Daniel's childish laughter, was now a sanctuary of silence, an eerie echo of her own loneliness. Every dusty toy, every drawing on the fridge, every pillow with the sweet scent of her son, each was a dagger to her already shredded heart. She moved like a ghost, daily chores becoming insurmountable mountains. The energy that once propelled her evaporated, replaced by a fatigue that weighed down her soul. In the cemetery, a place that should have been of peace and eternal rest, Clara found a semblance of solace. She visited Daniel's grave daily, rain or shine, in a ritual of mourning that kept her connected to the last physical piece of her beloved son. She brought fresh flowers, a new drawing, a small toy car, and with a choked voice, told stories, as if he could still hear her, as if the earth could transmit her words. She talked about the school day, about what he had for breakfast, about the longing that consumed her. It was an act of desperate love, an attempt to fill the void with her own voice. She felt the universe had gone silent for her, that the connection to the divine, the faith that sustained her before, had been broken. Every prayer seemed to bounce off an indifferent sky. One morning, while arranging a vase of white daisies on Daniel's small marble headstone, Clara noticed something strange. The soil around the grave seemed to have been disturbed. It wasn't the careful work of the cemetery gardener, nor the effect of the rain that had fallen the night before. The disturbance was irregular, almost violent. An immediate sense of unease invaded her. Her heart, already so fragile and vulnerable, began to pound in her chest with an alarming intensity. She tried to rationalize, seeking logical explanations in her grief-stricken mind. Perhaps it was a wild animal that roamed the cemetery at night, or perhaps a careless mistake by the maintenance crew. But a prick of intuition, a chilling shiver that ran down her spine, told her otherwise. It was something more, something perverse. That small detail ignited a spark of fear, a new anguish that added to her grief. That night, Clara's anguish turned into cruel insomnia. The image of the disturbed earth relentlessly hammered in her mind, robbing her of any semblance of peace. The fear that something was disturbing her son's eternal rest, the last place he lay, was simply unbearable. Driven by a desperation bordering On Madness, Clara had an idea that in her troubled mind seemed the only way out of her agony. She would buy a small security camera, one of those used to discreetly monitor environments, and secretly install it near Daniel's grave. She wanted to see with her own eyes what was happening there, to unravel the mystery that was corroding her from within. As dusk fell the next day, under the heavy, opaque cloak of darkness, Clara returned to the cemetery. The shadows cast by. The gnarled trees danced macabrely around her, and the cold night air tightened her chest. With her heart pounding uncontrollably and her hands trembling so much she could barely hold the small device, she crept between the dense bushes near Daniel's grave. Carefully, she hid the camera, pointing it at the headstone, barely daring to breathe to avoid making a sound. Back home, the wait was excruciating. Every minute felt like an eternity, the anxiety increasing with each tick of the clock, transforming into a pulsing agony. The next morning, with the sun still timidly rising on the horizon, painting the sky. In shades of grey and pink, Clara rushed to the cemetery. The air was cold and damp, and the silence was almost palpable. She retrieved the camera from its hiding spot and with trembling fingers and bated breath inserted the small memory card into her computer. The screen lit up, revealing the first images from the night before. For hours, nothing. The empty grave, the still grass, the deepening darkness. Clara began to feel a growing discouragement. Had she imagined it all? Was her mind, fragile from grief, playing tricks on her? It was then that the first movements appeared on the screen. An indistinct sound, a shadow. Clara's heart pounded and a chill ran down her spine. She leaned closer to the screen, barely blinking. What she saw next was not an animal, nor the gardener doing his routine work. It was nothing she could have imagined in her worst nightmares. A hooded figure, tall and shadowy, emerged from the middle of the night, moving with an almost ghostly slowness, approaching her son's grave. It was, unquestionably, a person. The figure stopped before Daniel's headstone and then, with a slow and deliberate movement, began to unearth the soil, removing the fresh flowers, the green grass, the small ornaments Clara had placed. She saw the shovel. She saw the bare hands. In a profane moment, and then, with a blood-chilling coldness, the figure began to dig with terrifying precision, as if opening Daniel's very grave. Clara's breath hitched in her throat, a guttural sound of pure horror. Her eyes widened in shock and disbelief, fixed on the screen that revealed the macabre scene. The image on the screen was clear, brutal, merciless. Who in their right mind would do something so inhuman, so cruel? What kind of monster would desecrate the grave of a child, an innocent angel who had barely had a chance to live? The unbearable pain of loss she already felt transformed into a cold, icy wave of rage, a consuming fire burning in her chest, an overwhelming desire for justice. Her soul, once empty and desolate, was now a whirlwind of indignation, a fury that propelled her to react. The figure continued its macabre action, indifferent to the pain it caused, as if performing a trivial task. At a certain point, it paused. The digging slowly raised its head and looked directly at the location where the camera was hidden. And then, with an expression Clara would never forget, it gave a dark, almost perverse smile, its lips stretching in a sneer. It was a smile that seemed to mock her, as if it knew it was being watched and still did not care, savoring the agony of that mother. Clara felt a chilling shiver run down her spine, a terror that paralyzed her. Her mind spun in a whirlwind of her thoughts, desperately searching for an explanation, any plausible explanation for such depravity. But there was no logic, only the pure and unquestionable manifestation of evil unfolding before her terrified eyes. That scene, that smile, imprinted themselves on her memory, a tattoo of horror on her soul. The image froze on the screen, a frame of terror amidst the chaos of Clara's mind. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably, an incessant chill that made her feel frozen inside. She simply could not believe what she had witnessed. Her son Daniel's grave, desecrated in such a cruel and vile way. That perverse smile of the figure still echoed in her mind, an endless torment. But then, the figure did something Clara would never expect, a movement that pulled her out of her horror-induced stupor. Instead of continuing to dig, the person began to place something inside the grave. A small object that looked like a toy, perhaps a car, but which, due to the distance and darkness, Clara could not clearly identify. Perplexity added to the terror. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure moved and vanished into the night's darkness, like a ghost dissolving into thin air. Clara watched the recording repeatedly, breathing heavily, and her eyes fixed on the screen, searching for any detail, any clue that could make sense of that madness. The only thing clear was the enigmatic silhouette of the figure, and above all, the sinister smile that haunted her. In the mix of anger and despair, she called the police. She handed over the recording, the undeniable proof that something terrible had happened. The investigation began. The officers, hardened men and women from years of crimes and tragedies, were perplexed. The idea of someone desecrating the grave of an innocent child was repulsive, something that defied human comprehension. The entire town was on alert. The story spread like wildfire, and the fear that a psychopath was on the loose gripped everyone. Parents hugged their children tighter, neighbors looked at each other with suspicion. Daniel's grave was meticulously examined by forensic scientists and experts. Every inch of soil was sifted. The mysterious object was finally found. It was, indeed, a small metal toy car, rusty and worn, as if it had been buried for a long time. Nothing unusual in itself. But why would someone go through all the trouble of desecrating a grave to place an old toy? The question hung in the air, unsolvable, feeding Clara's anguish and the police's frustration. The lack of an apparent motive made the crime even more macabre. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, dragging on in a haze of uncertainty. The police, despite their best efforts, found no solid leads. The hooded man remained a mystery, a shadow in the darkness. Clara was exhausted, consumed by anguish and fear. The image of that figure and the sinister smile haunted her every waking moment, and in her few disturbed dreams. The desecration of Daniel's grave, the inexplicable cruelty of that act, was an overwhelming weight that prevented her from moving on with her grief, from finding any peace for her son's soul. Until, one day, when hope had almost vanished, Clara received a call that would change everything. It was from the police station. The detective's voice on the other end of the line was calm, but held a tone of contained relief. They had a lead. A man, known to be a former cemetery employee who had been fired for severe psychological problems and increasingly erratic behavior, was being questioned. In his delusions, he boasted of freeing souls from random graves, gifting the dead with objects so they could travel to another plane. Confronted with Clara's camera recording, the man confessed. He had no clear motive for choosing Daniel's grave. It was just one of many he had desecrated in his troubled mind. The toy car was, in his distorted view, just another of his gifts for a soul he believed to be imprisoned. Despite the overwhelming pain and the horror of discovering the truth, Clara finally found a form of justice, however bittersweet. That sick man would be hospitalized and treated. The desecration, though terribly real and painful, had not been a personal attack against Daniel, but rather the manifestation of a deeply disturbed mind. The image of that sinister smile which had haunted her for so long finally began to lose its power, fading before the harsh reality of an illness. Clara, who desperately sought answers and justice, found a brutal yet liberating truth: the cruelty of a sick mind. But amidst all the darkness and terror, she also found a strength she didn't know she possessed, a resilience that propelled her to fight for the truth. And more than that, she witnessed the solidarity of a community that united in support, validating her pain and her relentless search. The faith in the improbable, the triumph of the soul, inevitable justice, it all manifested, even in the darkest circumstances. Clara's story is a dark and powerful reminder that evil can lurk where we least expect it, manifesting in inexplicable ways, but also that the relentless pursuit of truth, however painful and shocking, is essential to finding peace and justice. It is proof that a mother's courage can move mountains and unravel the most terrible mysteries, bringing to light what was hidden and allowing healing to begin. Have you ever faced a truth so disturbing that it made you question everything, but which in the end brought an unexpected kind of relief or understanding? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story froze your soul and then warmed it with the fire of truth and justice, leave your like, subscribe to the channel for more impactful narratives, and click on the next video to continue your thrilling journey of discoveries and miracles.